Hi everybody. So this is our last video for today, and this is a new article that I added that we're going to read today in class, but since we're not in class, we're going to do it this way. So this article is called 5 Reasons Why People Code Switch, and it is from a section of NPR called The Code Switch, right? So it was a inappropriate title for this. So and also, an appropriate subject for what we're talking about here, right? So we're talking about our home English or our home language versus the language that's most appropriate in the culture that we're in, right? So it talks about different people giving different examples of why they code switched, right? So our lizard brains take over, right? So what does this mean? It doesn't mean that you have a lizard in your brain. It means that the part of our brain that is similar to, a lizard that, takes over in situations when your body needs to kind of function automatically, right? Fight or flight. And they also say like the lizard brain is what, keeps us breathing. We don't have to think about breathing, right? We just do, because the part of our brain that doesn't really have a sense of consciousness is taking care of that, right? So the funny story is that this is a Japanese American who speaks both Japanese and American, and went and visited Japan, um, and visited a haunted house in Japan, and had a moment where, in this haunted maze, um, that she got scared. And in her moment of being scared, even though she was in Japan, even though she said that she believed herself to be, thoroughly bilingual, that she started screaming, right, English profanities. It's right here. Oh my effing God, get me the F out of here, etc., etc. You can fill in the blanks with your imagination. I consider myself fully bilingual, but I realize that at this moment when I'm in fight or flight survivor instinct situation, my mind switches to English, right? And this is probably because I've lived in the US all my life and never lived in Japan, right? So when she was upset, she switched back from, English or Japanese to English, right? And it might be more subtle, but notice when you're upset or angry or getting mad at someone, what dialect or what form of English you revert to. Because usually, right, when we're, using our quote unquote lizard brain, as this author puts it, that we revert back to the English that we're most comfortable with. Me, right? I, excuse the expression, go Jersey, right? When I get really angry. And I sound, very, very, very Jersey when I'm angry, right? So my parents are from Holland. And when they got angry with me, they would yell at me in Dutch, right? They would, say things in Dutch, to correct my behavior and things like that. So they reverted back to what was most comfortable for them, right? And that's what this woman is talking about when she is referring to the lizard brain, right? So we want to fit in. Very often people code switch both unconsciously and consciously to act or talk more like those around them. While this can be effective, it can also be perilous, right? And I want you to read this article, okay, or this part of the article, all right? But think about also, you're in college now, right? You're around a new group of people. How often Do you feel like your tone of voice is veering more towards the people that you're with, right? Because we are, right, herd animals. We are animals, right? And we're group animals. We want to be part of a group. We want to belong, right? It makes us feel better. So to what lengths does our brain go to make others around us feel comfortable and feel like, um, so that everyone feels like they belong, right? So we want to get something, right? So we're going to talk about this in terms of rhetoric and what rhetoric is, right? Rhetoric is using language to essentially get what you want, right? And code switching is part of that. So a lot of folks code switch not just to fit in, but to actively integrate themselves to others, or ingratiate rather themselves to others, sorry. We cannot tell you how many dozens of stories we got from people who work in service industries who said that a Southern accent is a surefire way to get better tips and more sympathetic customers. Isn't that interesting? Apparently, everyone who works in a restaurant picks up y'all immediately upon arriving at their job. If you can pull off the right accent and the right context, you can get all kinds of favors, right? And this is a story from Patty Hollingsted illustrates, right? So, read her story. But isn't that interesting that when, servers use a Southern accent, they get better tips, right? So, and remember, we talked about the example of getting pulled over by the police, right? That you use a specific tone, right? And you unconsciously switch and you say, um, you know, excuse me, what seems to be the problem, officer? And you sound very, very polite and formal and whatnot because you want to get something or not get something in this case, which is you don't want to get a ticket, right? So you change the way that you speak in order to get a favorable response, right? And what you want is to not get a ticket. Okay. So, and here's something funny, right? We want to say something in secret. We collected many sweet stories of people code switching in order to hide in plain sight, a habit most common among people in love. So, because this tactic often relies on assumptions, it can get one in trouble, as Veronica Rodriguez can attest, right? So, um, here's a story about somebody who's using and code switching and language to say something secretly to someone. And if this is for those of us, right, who are bilingual, how many times have you spoken to your parents or said something snide to someone who also speaks your second language and assumed that the other person doesn't understand, right? I have a funny story about that. So I need to use a wheelchair in the airport, and I took a trip in 2017 that had a layover in in Germany, right? So, and I need a wheelchair, and I'm not a skinny person, right? So, and I speak a little bit of German, not a lot, but enough, a little bit, right? And the woman pushing the wheelchair assumed that I was American, right? And she was complaining that I was heavy, right? And that I was so heavy that I could potentially be pregnant with twins, right? Zwanger met tweelingen, right? And I pronounced that Dutch because I speak Dutch. So that was another funny story too about speaking German with a Dutch accent. Anyway, so I understood what she said, and I turned around and I said, no, I'm not pregnant with twins, and I will be reporting this to your supervisor. and you should have seen all the blood drain from her face. And she said, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm just having a bad day. And I was like, yeah, but it's not, nice to make fun of people. But on the flip side, in all honesty, I have said things in Dutch to people who also speak Dutch, if I want to make, a funny comment about somebody or something, right? And I don't want them to understand what I'm saying, right? So so that's what they mean here by wanting to say something in secret, right? And number 5, right, it helps us to convey a thought. Certain concepts need um, that perfect bon mot, right? So bon mot means like the best word, right, to come across effectively. Many people switch languages or employ colloquialisms to express um, particular ideas, as this story from Jennifer Mohanan. So I want you to read that, right? But think about, again, my bilingual friends, especially, that are there words in your second language that don't translate, right? And that are, you need to use them, or you need to explain to people what they mean, um, because there's no other word in in English to compare, right? So there's a Dutch word that's gezelligheid, right? And there's no other word to describe it in the English language. So instead, right, I explained to my friends um, what it means, so that we can kind of use it in context, because there's no comparison, right? It is the perfect word in English or Dutch or any other language to describe what it is. So, and I'm not going to tell you what it is. I'm going to, when we do our forum, I'm going to ask you to think about, I'm going to give you a context and ask you to think about that context of what it might potentially mean. And Tyler, you know what it means, so you have an advantage over everybody. And so then, you can help them out if you want to. So we do have one student that does speak Dutch. So you have the advantage, and you can use that advantage however you would like, young Jedi. So I want you to read through the stories and whatnot, and I'm going to, in the forum, ask you questions about your experiences in comparison, and um, what you think about this idea of code switching, right? Because all of this is to start to get you to think about how we code switch, so that you can do it on purpose, right? A lot of these things that people are talking about, they're looking back and talking about code switching and thinking about code switching and whatnot, and realizing that they did it. But when it was happening, they didn't realize that they were doing it, right? So what I want you to do is start thinking about when you do it, right? Thinking about when you code switch, and start doing it deliberately. Start thinking like, should I code switch here, right? Because that kind of thinking will help you to be a better analytical thinker, right? But it'll also help you to be a better rhetorician, right? If you can do this stuff on purpose, how successful will you be, right? Because manipulating language, these little symbols that help us to communicate with one another, can make you a wildly successful person if you know how to do it well, right? So that's part of the tools that we're going to be talking about in this unit, and I'm going to be giving you in this unit. So if you have any questions, email me, or you can post your questions in the forum for assignment questions and Moodle related questions and whatnot. But keep an eye out for the forum. associated with this. And hopefully, I will see everybody on Wednesday.